First of all, to our students and alumni, thank you for joining us. These are interesting times, and we've titled this session COVID-19: Your Career, Your Job, and it's partly because so much turmoil is going on in the worker's mind and the employee's mind, and we're all very interested and very concerned about others during a time of a crisis. But also we're concerned about ourselves and what's going on in our own lives. In the work world, how should we be dealing with so much of the change that's occurred in our daily lives? How are we relating with our coworkers, our boss, our clients? What might we be able to do to sort of thrive and survive throughout this process as we get through it, but also as we work and continue to sort of marshal our career and protect our career, protect our job, maybe even grow our opportunities. And I have a wonderful dear friend, Elaine Varelas, who's a managing partner of Keystone Partners, and she's a very successful businesswoman in her own right and has built a very big business. And she's also, in addition to that, is a very successful executive coach at the highest levels and works with executives in career management and career development. Additionally, when she has time as well, she writes for the Boston Globe and gives career advice as the doctor in terms of career in the Boston Globe, and just a wonderful person and a dear friend. So we thought I'd ask Elaine to say a couple of words and so forth, and then we're just going to jump into whatever you all want to talk about, and questions or concerns that you have on your mind about the workplace, about jobs, about your career, issues that are of concern to you. Okay, and Elaine, if you would like to say a few things.
Sure. Thanks very much for those very kind words, Jim. I certainly appreciate that introduction. I'm excited to be talking to you today. I love working with undergraduate business majors and MBAs. And a million years ago, I actually worked at BU in the School of Management. So it's a treat to be back. I'm very interested in careers, very interested in getting jobs and talking about how people make that happen. And it is possible to make that happen during this pandemic. And it's very possible to make sure that you position yourself to keep your job and potentially advance during this time as well. So I really wanted to talk about how you can go about finding a job if that's what you need right now, and talk about how you can retain your job. I was interviewed twice today, once by WBUR and another time by Channel 25. And a couple of the things that we were talking about were some data on a survey that we recently did. And out of the companies who responded, 60% of the companies we spoke to are still hiring. And so I think that's a really important number for people to understand. It's certainly not every industry, we recognize that, but they are hiring, and they're hiring in some specific areas that we should talk more about. The other part that we talked about was how can you deal with your manager? If you're new to working remotely and your manager is new to managing remotely, how can you cope with that and make sure that you can deal with that successfully? So I'd like to find out more of the areas that you're most interested in or most concerned about, and really expand on some of those thoughts. So I have some general notes, but I really would like to zero in on the things that are of greatest interest to you.
Great. Thank you, Elaine. To all our participants out there, there's just send in your questions, and I will go through them as much as I can. And we've already have a question that came in. And Elaine, the question is, what can I expect in the global pandemic in terms of changes in our workplace, in terms of cuts, freezes, and hiring, budget reductions, benefits, etc.? What happened in the dot-com bust of 07, 08, and the financial crisis. How is this similar or possibly dissimilar to that?
You know, it's actually very dissimilar. Though the outcome seems the same, it's very dissimilar. And I would say part of that is no one recognizes when the end will be. Financial prognosticators could say, this is a recession, here's how long it will last. We see what happens, we see what needs to happen to have things change. Because this is so health oriented and is such an unknown, there's a big difference about what the end will look like. People can talk about going back to work and starting up the economy, but until people feel safe, they're not necessarily going to do that. So I do see a difference. One of the biggest things I see as a difference in this situation is the heavy use of furloughs in other than manufacturing. Furloughs were always used in manufacturing industries when they would, put a hold on manufacturing, people were furloughed. And furloughed is different than being laid off. Furlough typically means that you've lost your position. However, you retain a relationship with the company. They continue to pay your benefits. They anticipate a callback date, and you don't have to go through the whole application and hiring process all over again. So they really don't want you to find another job. They would like you to be available for them, the organization, as soon as they're ready to start back up. When you're laid off, you're done. You're given some kind of a severance, given your benefits can end. They might give you help to find a new job. They want you to move on and find new opportunities. So those are big differences. In 08, everyone was laid off. It was done, and there was no picture of when people would bring you back. So that's something different than we're seeing right now. I think the other issue that people are recognizing is this is a very interesting message to companies who have, particularly in the Boston area, who have struggled with the real estate costs of putting employees up and putting more employees into cubes and putting more employees into less and less space or sharing offices, partly for the cultural benefits, partly for the collegiality, but a huge part of it was based on real estate costs. So I think we will see more people working remotely, more companies saying that they're going to do an entire review of which positions can actually work remotely and still be productive. And I think managers will be trained on how to manage people remotely. So I think there are two halves going on that are not making this remote work easy. One is you have managers who don't know how to manage people working remotely. And two, people remotely don't know how to be good remote employees. So if you're a remote employee right now, here are the things, the clues that I would give you, is document what you're doing, either in your Outlook calendar or your shared calendar if you have one. Put things in there. There's nothing that aggravates a manager more than looking into a calendar and seeing nothing, because maybe you're creating world peace and the next vaccine, but if they can't see it in your calendar, you're doing nothing. And so it's very simple, but I can't tell you how many senior people leave their calendars empty. The other thing is, talk to your manager. Ask them what the best way to communicate with them is. Do they want to see an end of the day report? Do they want to have a once a week written report? Do they want to have a once a week phone call coupled with a written report? Volunteer to share information. Don't make them come looking for you. You will have a happy manager. You'll be able to showcase the productivity, the contributions that you're making, and you will ensure that you have just a little bit more job security than other people who are kind of missing in action.
That's great, Elaine. And the old-fashioned make sure you have a trail of some of the work that you're doing is just as much important today as it's always been. But that's great advice. The next question that came in is very similar to some of the things you were just talking about, but it says, thank you very much, Elaine. Do you see a lot of new and upcoming remote positions because of the crisis? Do you think people are buying what the work from home thing is selling?
I think a lot of people have wanted to work from home, and have approached their managers, approached their organizations about the opportunity to do it. Now that so many of us have done it, I think many of us want to go back to the office. So I think we might want to rethink that. I never thought I'd want to commute. I'm looking for it. So I think there are some people who can be remarkably productive from home. They are very technologically astute. They're very self-motivated. They're driven. Their work is very measurable. It's metrics organized. And I think if you're that kind of person and you're in that kind of job, yes, I think you will be able to say, you know, will they buy what we're selling for work from home? I think you'll be able to do that. I think if you're a leader of people, you won't be working from home 5 days a week. You'll be in front of people. You'll be with people. Even if you're traveling, it will cut down on that. But if you're a leader of people, you'll have to be there. I think that many organizations, again, to save on real estate and to get the best talent, will be more flexible about allowing people to work remotely. And it's interesting because I think that even the language that we use, I think when you're working remotely, it carries a little bit more seriousness than when you're working from home. So if you think about people who travel all the time for work and are working from hotels, they're working remotely. They wouldn't necessarily choose to be there, but working remotely really describes the kind of work that you're doing and what it is you need to do. If you're working now from home, then what you know, I hope, to be successful is you've tripled your communication. Communicating with your colleagues, communicating with your managers, communicating with people who work for you. You're doing a lot of touching base, a lot of communicating. I typically run a meeting with our salespeople every 2 weeks. We're now having meetings twice a week, because everything is different. And they appreciate that. They're looking forward to that as much as we are. The first week we started working from home, we had a leadership team meeting every day. We're now down to 3 times a week. But there is so much going on that this is a crisis, it's a change, it's significant, and so everyone needs to add so much more communication to what you're doing. So you really need to be able to do that. For those of you who are interviewing, I know I'm jumping topic, but for those of you who are interviewing, from now till whenever, if you've been a highly productive remote worker, make sure that that's something that your people can provide references for you on what you've done, that people put that into your LinkedIn profile. Not everyone, again, is technology comfortable or self-motivated. People get distracted very easily.
Great. This is a question, Elaine, and this person would like your advice. I've been furloughed for 5 months with no guarantee of reinstating into my positions. I've worked for a tech company within customer success management. I am wondering if Boston has SaaS-based companies that are currently hiring. I'm feeling that I feel like I've been forced to voluntarily separate myself for a lump sum severance package, since there is no guarantee of me getting my job back.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you've been furloughed, you might still have your benefits, but you've been given a severance. So you're someplace in between. One of the nicest things that you can do is, or one of the most positive resources is, you can look up Dun & Bradstreet. The Boston Public Library has a lot of databases that would be available to you to help you do research about companies who have software as a service or SaaS companies that you're most interested in. So D&B, Hoover's, do some research based on where those companies are headquartered. But one of the interesting things is, why do they need to be headquartered here? Why are you limiting yourself geographically? If this is something that you want to do and you can do it remotely, you don't need to take a look at where they're headquartered. You can take a look at wherever those companies are, and again, sell yourself as a highly effective remote worker for organizations that would need your services.
Great, thank you. Here's another thank you to you, Elaine, for doing this. BU has such a huge international student population. How do they react to this? It's been exacerbated by the recent immigration ban by the president. Are companies going to become completely non-accepting of international candidates? And in the long run, what effect would that have on universities like BU itself?
I think companies are very accepting of international students, international employees. It's a global workforce, we know that. And so that's a huge part of what every organization recognizes that they'll need. People with language abilities, people with cultural capabilities. I think one of the hardest issues, though, comes back to citizenship and whether a company has to spend the money on the legal support to get you qualified for whatever kind of visa status you might need to be able to work. So that becomes the primary issue. One of the best ways you can do that if you're a current student is to try to get internships and develop relationships with organizations before you're looking for a full-time job. The other thing that's really important is BU's got an amazing alumni population, and I would encourage you to use that population in terms of developing relationships. You can use LinkedIn and do some research. You can use the alumni office, the career services office. Find out who those alumni are at the companies that are of interest to you, and start developing relationships with them. It doesn't need to wait until you're graduated, until your program is done, to start developing those relationships.
Next question is, how long do you expect it will take after this pandemic for hiring to bounce back to normal, quote unquote? Will we see reduced compensation packages as a result of this? Or what will the normal look like?
As of right now, we've not seen reduced compensation in hiring. So with some of the companies who are trying not to do layoffs, we have seen organizations that their executives have taken a 20% pay cut, or Korn Ferry CEO and CFO just announced a 50% pay cut. So they're only making 500 grand right now. So we feel for them, but I think it did get the attention that they wanted it to get. I do not believe we're going to see pay cuts. I think that you're still going to offer value. You still have to be in the position that what you do is worth what they're going to pay you. And I think that becomes really important. I think most often when people come through outplacement after having lost a job, the first two questions they ask are, will I get a job? And will I have to take a step back? And we don't find that that's the case. The large bulk of the population stays lateral. The most recent study that we did showed 18% actually increased their compensation from where they were after they lost their job. The smallest part do take a step back. Some because they've changed industries or done something entirely differently. But the bulk of people stay lateral, and then again, 18% with getting an increase is important. And as far as when, I don't know.
Do you think, Elaine, that the worker who doesn't lose his or her job this coming year or 18 months, that they probably won't see pay increases?
I don't believe they will see pay increases. And again, I think it's looking at the entirety of their organization. And so again, what do you do for yourself? You take a look at, am I offering 100% of the value that I'm getting right now? Do I have bandwidth? Is there something else I can contribute? Should I talk to my manager about training a newer person? Is there some other project that has been on the back burner for some time that I can contribute to? And so you may not see a big raise, you may not see a bonus while companies try to make sure again that they're stable, but you can really ensure your own security in your role if you continue to add value. And I think often people, when we're tired, you show up for work, you do your job in a rote manner, but you don't necessarily think about the value that you add that keeps that company running every single day. And the more you think about yourself that way, and the more you have conversations with your manager that way, the more secure you'll be in your long-term success. And it is a great lesson for the rest of your career.
That's right. I think that's great advice. I mean, seriously, to think, how do I sort of expand my footprint a little bit? How do I gain more knowledge, more relationships, show more value? It might be a great time to do that, knowing that probably we're not going to see increases in compensation for probably a year or more. The next question, Elaine, for job seekers that have run into companies with hiring freezes or other delays in the recruitment process, what advice do you have for how best to stay in touch, stay connected with these companies until we get to the other side?
That's such a great question, because the same is happening on the employer side. So employers are talking about keeping people warm. For our own company. So one, we have an opening that I told Jim about for accounting and junior or senior accountant, and we're actively interviewing. Two, I've got a person in Dallas who I want to hire, and I just can't right now. So I'm keeping this person warm. We're in touch on a regular basis. I'm trying to let him know when we anticipate being able to make that happen. I think as the candidate, you want to keep your relationship warm. You might see an article that is about your industry and send that along to the recruiter or the hiring manager. You might see something about their competitor and send that information along. What you want to let them know is that their job, their company, that situation is the one that you really want, and that you recognize that they're in a difficult position and can't move right now, but that you're willing to be patient. Now, does that mean you should stop your job search? Absolutely not. You can't. You don't know what's going to happen with that company. The same as the person who asked the question about a 5-month furlough. It's hard to predict what that timing is. But if you're very interested in that job and that company, then you need to continue to present a very positive and patient front by keeping that relationship warm.
Elaine, what advice would you have for someone who's going to be asked to go back into the office and they're not totally comfortable and they just don't feel safe for their personal health and so forth?
That's a great question, and I've dealt with that with friends lately, particularly some hardware engineers who've been asked to go back. So I think there's a full set of reasonable questions to ask. The first are, has the office been deep cleaned? What activities have you done? What precautions have you taken with the facility before I go in? And the reason I'm asking is I'm concerned for my own health, and I'm concerned for the health of my family as I return home, and I'm wanting to make sure that I don't bring anything back to them. So I think that comes first. And then the conversation about whether or not you really do have to go back. I had a conversation with someone in my office today who was going to go back in. I can't even remember for what, but I said, I don't see any reason why you have to go back. So don't put yourself at risk. And so having the conversation about whether you really have to or not is very, very reasonable. If there is a reason, and there are some reasons, I think again, is there protective gear being provided? Will there be other people in the office? Are there time frames where you'll be able to be there alone? All of those questions about your own physical safety are really important.
Um, how open should we be regarding our personal health? And people are looking at each other as to who may be ill and who's not, and who could be a carrier and who's not. And what are some of the boundaries around sharing in terms of our personal health history and so forth?
That's such a difficult situation, and I think there are physical ailments that are acceptable, let's say right now, to admit that make you immunocompromised. It seems reasonable to say you have asthma, reasonable to say you have diabetes. No one wants to hear that you tested positive, or that you, unless you've been even through it and have now plasma that someone might find valuable. But I think there are so many other situations that people don't want to talk about. And I think you can say to a manager, you can say, I have a health history that puts me at risk. And at this point, I'm not comfortable going back into the office. I can't risk my health. Anything that I can do for work from here, I'm more than willing to do. And my job is important to me. I don't think you need to be fully revealing. I had a conversation with a woman, an HR woman, who was one of the first out of her organization out, and she was brand new to the company, less than 2 weeks. And she told her manager that she had a genetic immunocompromising disease and needed to go out. And that's where she left it. And that was a lot to reveal. And so nobody asked her any more questions. And I think that was plenty.
In the age that we're in today, in this sort of virtual work, when does the day begin? When does the day end? When do we take breaks?
It's what I've found is so many people are talking about they're working so much more than they used to. So the day begins when you're still in bed and you pick up your phone and you check your email to see what's urgent. And for most of us, that's between 5 and 6, maybe not in college, but, or even an MBA. I love those days. But that's typically what happens. So people start working early. And then people recognize that, oh my God, I've got a Zoom meeting. I better find a comb, take a shower, get dressed. It's really important to schedule in time. The first 2 weeks that we were working remotely, I was working straight through, and it took me 2 weeks to say, this is nuts. I put a hold on 1 o'clock. After that, I said, I need lunch. I'm cranky and I am not at my best self. So having a dog is a wonderful thing. Schedule walks for the dog. Use them as the excuse. You have to get up. You have to physically move. You have to drink enough water to keep yourself going. And it's the advice that you would give anyone who worked for you. And so you need to take that advice of your own and put it in your calendar and schedule it. People are finding it hard at home to have boundaries. What room are you in? Is it really an office? Is it a living room? Are there kids around, animals around? So set some boundaries for yourself where you actually do sign off and you wait until the next day. A lot of senior leaders are trying not to send messages. They are timing things to go out at 8 o'clock the next morning as they think of things throughout the night that they send, but they recognize people need a break.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point, and that goes back to a discussion we have a lot at Questrom in the MBA program about work-life balance prior to COVID-19, and when is it appropriate to enter into the worker's home in the evening. In the old days when we'd commute and we come back home and you get an email at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and you start to think about that email rather than be present with your family. And with this current situation, it seems like all of us are pulling a lot longer days. There's no beginning and no end because communication really never stops. Another great question here. Elaine, do you personally, given your experience, think that it would be difficult for people to readjust to going back to work? A lot of companies have to offer more remote positions? Will they offer more remote positions in the future after the pandemic?
I think it's going to be a hard adjustment to go back in. Again, I think we'll have a lot of fear about going back in. As we talked about earlier, are you the first person back in? I think people with children who are not back at school are going to need to make arrangements for childcare. That's going to be very hard to come by if they didn't have an after-school program or a preschool program or a nanny, many of whom have left. I think all of these things are going to be significantly challenging. I think companies are very worried about losing their culture, and collegiality has a lot to do with that. And so if suddenly half your workforce is remote, can you actually retain a culture that makes you very competitive in the market, that helps you come to conclusions faster, makes decisions faster? So I think there'll be both. I think they absolutely will have remote workers, and they've had remote workers, and there are people who look for just jobs working remotely, and they've done that for a long time. But again, I think taking a look at yourself to say, what am I really designed for, is going to be really important. If you're not able to really do 100%, if you considered yourself a 1099 and were being paid on project work, would you be getting your full salary based on how you work remotely? So you have to find the right environment for you. And again, I think employers will be flexible, but there are a certain number of jobs that just won't be remote for a long time.
How does the employee talk to their boss about the expenses they're incurring by working at home? Whether it's just added equipment or space, or some refurnishing, the electricity and everything else that goes along with setting up a home office. Any advice on how to approach your boss about the expenses that you're putting out?
I think the equipment, the technology, I think all of that is very reasonable to talk to your boss about. So if you didn't have a computer at home and you need one, I think that's very reasonable. We had an employee ask about an office chair. She thought we should support by buying her a desk chair. I didn't agree with that. So I thought that she should probably have a chair that she can work from in her own house, and she could be responsible for that. So I probably wouldn't feel that way about electricity as well. Yes, you are home more and your lights are on more. You're probably buying your own coffee when you used to have it at the office. This is a give and take in terms of organizations. And if you're talking about, let's say you're talking about $20 a month, maybe even $30, I'd probably take a pass at asking for financial support. Let's put things in perspective.
That's great. Next question is, for students still in the active job search, should they take whatever opportunities are available or continue searching for ones that are, offer a fair title and pay, or is it time to lower your expectations?
It depends. Were your expectations reasonable to begin with? If they were, then that's really important. You need to take a job that you'll be in. You don't want to take a job that you're going to leave in 6 months and have the beginning of your career look like you're a job hopper, that you don't have any stability, that you had no confidence in yourself. You need to develop a list of what's really important to me. What are the kinds of things that I want to do on the job? What's the compensation that I need? What are the benefits that I need? What's the work that I want to do? When you get your first offer or the things that you're going after, let's take a look at what the percentage is. Is it a 50% match? That doesn't sound great. 70% match sounds pretty good because you're not going to hit 100. But take a look at how much does this opportunity give me of the things that I think are really important. And talk to your faculty members, talk to your colleagues about whether they think this is a good level role for you. You need to take a look at what's out there. What competitively are you seeing that's available? But you should have some good criteria about what the right job is for you. And you want to at least be able to stay there 12 months.
Okay. And is gig work something that should be pursued in the interim, or what's your thought?
Yeah, gig work has really broadened in terms of what it's considered. It's not just an Uber driver. It's not, I don't even know what else. But again, what I do know is there's real power in being able to be a W-2 employee or a 1099. So if there are projects that you can do for a company and you can be, quote unquote, in a gig or a self-employed, absolutely. What you need to take a look at is, does this give me a new skill set? Does it give me something that will make me more employable in my next role? Does it give me money, which I need right now? All of those things are good reasons to do that. So balance those out, and balance those out against full-time opportunities as well.
Great. Next question, piggybacking off of the lower expectations question. Will employers be changing the way they review candidates? Could you speculate on what they might be looking for?
Right now, everybody's going to want to know what your tech skills are. I don't care what your focus is, if you're OD, if you're accounting or finance, you've got to be technology savvy. And you want to have those on your resume. You want to be able to showcase that. You want to have people write LinkedIn referrals for you that talk about your tech savvy skill. So regardless of industry, regardless of function, that's one of the things that's a must. I think the other things that are really important, come back to some soft skills, are, can you present? If you're doing a Zoom interview, do you know where to look at the camera? Do you know how to present and engage someone in a conversation? All those things are going to really matter and be just so much more part of the interview process. Your written skills are going to be important. And again, your ability to communicate the fact that you're self-disciplined, you're self-managed, you know how to work. And you've got to be able to really make it very clear to a hiring manager that that's what you're there for.
Good. Here's another great question. My company offers over $5,000 in annual tuition reimbursement. With all the cuts and expenses, how do I approach my manager about this? Will it make me look like I'm greedy?
Absolutely not. It will make you look like, if you're choosing the right course to take, it will make it look like you want to be more valuable to your organization. Whatever the class is that you want to take, whatever the course is, your job is to articulate how and why you'll be more valuable to the organization after you've completed it. You may also have a little bit more time. You don't want to say you have a lot more time, but a little bit more time to dedicate to using that experience, using that education in current activities on the job that can help, again, help make that organization more successful. If they freeze tuition reimbursement, then it's a whole different story. But if they've chosen not to at this point, they may be saying, no, we need people to take some classes that can actually help us.
Next question. How do I maintain my good position with my team and my teammates, my peers in the virtual world? What advice would you have?
Yeah. Do both formal and informal interactions are going to be really important for you. You are going to want to make sure that you might schedule an informal coffee. Get everybody together for an informal coffee so you can talk about what's happening in the world, not just what's happening at the world of work. You also want to make sure that you retain that one-on-one conversation with people that you're in touch with and that you have relationships with. If you're leading that group, you've got to make sure that you're having both one-on-ones and team activities as well, and many, many more than you would have anticipated if you were in the office. So it takes a lot more energy to arrange them, schedule them. You're not going to just walk by. So don't leave people out in terms of that. You can also just send a thoughtful email to someone letting them know, you hope they're okay, their kids are okay, their parents are okay. That's helpful as well. And they're very, very well received. One of the things that we did at the company is we sent out just thinking of you notes to everyone we know who works in healthcare, all of our customers who work in healthcare. So same thing, if you know people who do that, part of your broader network, those are the people that you want to be in touch with, in addition to the people within your own organization. And not just your immediate team, but people who support you. Maybe they're your internal customers or you're their internal customer. Be in touch with those people as well.
With your expertise on the job market, and if a student is still searching, are there particular areas that you would say, take a focus on this sector or that sector?
Well, biotech has a huge need right now and a full range of positions. It's hard to get into, but it's so significant in the greater Boston area that I think that's one. Technology as a whole is another that I would continue to focus on. If you're still searching and you're having a hard time, you need to take a step back and do an audit of what you're doing. What are your activities? So one of the things that people most often fall down on is networking. And networking virtually is challenging, but it is the most effective way to uncover jobs and job opportunities. So that's one area that I would do an audit on. Have I really developed a network that's leading me to other opportunities and other companies and other people I can talk to? And the other is do an assessment with a colleague, a friend, a trusted advisor on how you are interviewing. Are you doing a good job representing what your skills are? If you're a person that the interviewer finds it difficult to have a conversation with, you're probably not going to move on in the interview process. And so those are the two areas I would audit if you've been in the market for a longer period of time. And a long time is, a long time starts at about 6 months. So if you've been in the market a month, that's nothing. 2 months, nothing. 3 months, you're getting there. But over 6 months is when you want to start taking a look at, okay, do I need to audit what it is I'm doing for activity?
What advice would you have in terms of the virtual interview, the Zoom interview?
Practice, practice, practice. Check out your lighting, check out your makeup, check out your shave, comb your hair, wear professional clothing, see what's in your background, have your notes available right in front of you. Make sure you know how the technology works. Make sure you know how to get in and out quickly. Make sure you know how your volume works. The technology has to be just invisible to people so that they're really focused on you and you're focused on them. Yeah. So you need to ask great questions. You have to have great answers. And people are doing very intense Zoom interviews, video interviews, and you really need to be prepared for those.
Do you believe that the Zoom interview phenomenon will grow because of this and may become?
Absolutely. It's just too expensive to have people travel everywhere. It takes people out of their workplace for a couple of hours. I think that the face-to-face will still be the final, but I think we're going to see more and more virtual interviews further and further into the process. We'll see panel interviews into the process. And as more companies are global, you'll see, presentations that you'll do where the Zoom panel will be at the top and you'll be presenting more information. I believe this is definitely here to stay, and I think the technology will just continue to improve.
So we should crack the code on this technique.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to the people in terms of their family, as in terms of they're working at home, they're working longer days, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of learning. You don't feel as secure because you don't see the nuances of things in the office. And then you also have your family around. Any advice or any coaching about sort of managing the whole picture, including your family and friends?
I think scheduling your family is going to be more and more important. You really don't need to look at your email at 7 o'clock. I think it's a great opportunity to have breakfast with your family, have some downtime, focus on what's going to happen for everyone during the day. Everyone in the house has all sorts of stress, and we hear about meltdowns that people are having all over the place. Have breakfast with your kids, have breakfast with your spouse, talk about what the day is going to look like. Sign on at 8:30. I think that's very reasonable. Recognize that some days you might all be able to have lunch together. What a great opportunity. Do it. Schedule it and make it happen. And then try to sign off at a reasonable time as well. Most people in professional roles are signing off at 6 o'clock, having dinner, putting kids to bed, and signing back on. But your family hopefully will be here for a long time with you. And I would really encourage you to invest in them. And I don't care if it's your spouse, your kids, your partner, your cat, or your dog. All of these people are enhancing your life, and you really need to invest in them. Or your roommate. Let's add them into the mix as well. But you really need to invest in them, and hopefully they're enhancing your life and can help minimize stress as opposed to maximize it.
This is a great question, and you'll love it, Elaine. If you were a graduating MBA student and going out into the job market in the next month or two, and you still didn't have your position, what would be your strategy?
The biggest strategy that I can tell you is to develop your network. You have got to have a network. So I'll give you a great story that goes back to my BU days. So this was 1981. I was running on-campus recruiting at BU. And so the companies who were hiring were coming on campus to hire undergraduates and MBAs. I have contacts to this day that I met then, and they're responsible for hiring at different organizations. It's 1981. So if I needed to call one of those guys or women, I easily could. And that's what you need to work on. If you start developing your contacts and your network and offering to help them, because networking is mutual. If you're on a one-way street, it's not going to work. If you offer to help them, they'll help you. And not everyone will, so you've got to develop a really good and broad network. That's the one place that I would focus.
Great. Next question. How do I have a difficult conversation with one of my employees through Zoom?
You do it the exact same way that you would do it if you were face-to-face. You schedule it. You say, I want to spend some time with you, just focused on a conversation about the work that we're involved with. So let's schedule it for 9 o'clock, whatever time it is. Let's make sure that you've got private time. The kids are someplace else, the dog's someplace else, so that you and I can talk about the work that we're involved with. I think in that conversation, you can say, these are really challenging times. I understand that. I want to make sure that I can help you be as successful as possible. But here are the things that we need to talk about and that I'd like to see. And then you need to be very concrete about what it is that you need to see, the performance that you need to see, the contributions that you need to see, the metrics that whatever it is. And then what I would do is follow up with that same conversation in writing, making sure everyone understands what the conversation's been. And then in that conversation, you have to listen. Let them tell you what's going on, what their challenges are as well. But now's the time where you really need some direct conversation, and then some listening, some acknowledgement of what that person's had to say. And then again, the contribution back that says, okay, are we in agreement about these are the things that we need to see?
Okay. This question goes back to a similar question at the beginning, and that's about how visible should I be with my boss?
You can't be annoying, so you can't be a pest, but what you do need to do is let your boss know you're working. You're contributing, you're working hard, the other things that you're involved with, other people that you're talking to. And again, nobody needs a suck up or a brown nose, but people have to have visibility into what you're doing. Put it in your calendar. Do an end of the week write-up about the things that you've been involved with, the challenges that you might need help on in the future. Make sure they know what you're doing.
Next question, as this sort of pandemic drags on and our virtual world continues, what advice do you have for the worker in terms of just keeping your spirits up and keeping a positive attitude and not conveying negativity in the Zoom world?
I think that's where your colleagues need to come in. Certainly you use your family for support and your friends, but what I've found is colleagues can be very supportive of one another and can say, we've started some of our meetings with what's good, what happened good today, share some of the positives that you've experienced, and the team then gets to experience that as well. They've shared their learnings on things that work well, things that don't work so well. So I think building in that that real positive spirit can be very encouraging. And I think you can do it with any community that you're part of, any virtual community that you're part of. So build those. If you were part of a book club, have a Zoom book club meeting. If you miss some college roommates, get them together. So I think we're going to need to be more and more proactive about this. And I think the other part of it is the self-care. You know, whether you're doing push-ups or sit-ups or planks in your living room or on a treadmill or on your street with your mask on, taking breaks, getting out there, that self-care is going to be very, very important as this continues.
Next question. What advice would you give to the worker in terms of Zoom happy hours and social hours and other activities?
Well, my first advice whenever there's a happy hour is don't get drunk. So being drunk at work events is not allowed. However, I think that they're welcome to certainly have a glass of wine or a beer or a sparkling water at some of the social events. You're letting people into your home. I think people might want to comment on something. So again, you've got to be at a place where you're comfortable sharing the background, sharing the environment, and also recognizing that you're at work. So just because you're home, you can't let down your professional demeanor. It can be informal, but you're still at a work event. I think they're valuable. Again, I think a virtual lunch is a great activity. I think a virtual coffee is a great activity. And the more either you can initiate those or you might suggest to your manager that they initiate one of those, I think your managers would welcome the ideas of how to support the workforce.
Great. And that along with networking, Elaine, to your point about networking, having those virtual coffees, sometimes it's easier to get a networking appointment and have coffee when the person doesn't have to travel to have coffee with you. Here's a networking question. How does networking change in light of the pandemic? Leaders may be less willing to take calls from students, especially knowing he or she may be looking for a job. How can one approach the situation with sensitivity?
I think approaching people to network is always about asking people for time. So whether it's coffee or lunch, or lunch is too much time. Coffee is a perfect amount of time. The best way to get someone to say yes is to use a bridge. You have to have that networking bridge that said, I understand you were an A student of Jim French, and Jim thought that you and I should talk about the kind of work that you're doing. And hopefully Jim has said that. Those are the kind of bridges that are going to help people say yes to talking to you and meeting with you. And yeah, they know you're looking for a job. They recognize that. But most people further in their careers have made a commitment to help newer, younger people in the marketplace get jobs. So they'll talk to them. We can't talk to 100 a week. We've got work to do. But almost everyone is willing to talk to some people. But you have to have a good reason. And every one of those networking meetings, you should end with, tell me any way that I could possibly help you. I'd love to offer you any support that I can. And you never know what it might be in terms of what they might come up with to say, you know what, I need more information about this or whatever. But that offer puts you in a great position. I'll tell you one horror story about live networking that you don't have to worry about. I was introduced to a woman who wanted to have a networking lunch. I don't want to do networking lunches. It's too long, but I did because she had a good bridge. We went to lunch, and at the end of lunch, she picked up the check and she said, my half is this. And I was shocked because if she had offered to pick up the check, I would have picked up the check. But because she didn't offer, I pulled out my half. If you ask anyone to do anything, coffee, you have to offer to pay. And you might even offer someone to say, you know, I'm happy to give you a Starbucks gift card for when you can have a cup of coffee outside. But you need to be prepared for that. And that's another good reason that coffee is perfect and lunch and dinner is a forget about it.
That's right. I totally agree. And your point about reciprocity, sometimes young people think that they have nothing to offer, say a businessman or a businesswoman in terms of helping them out, but they might be surprised in terms of knowledge and technology or studies that they've done. And down the road, certainly, our young people will be running the world, and they'll have power to assist other people. Just in closing, Elaine, for the students that might be having difficulty right now, and it's a tough time, and starting to get a little bit anxious, give some last comments in terms of advice for those students.
You will go to work. It may take longer than you want it to do, and I understand that, but you will go to work. So I posted 103 people that we've been working with in Massachusetts got jobs in March. These are people with experience, so it's going to take longer for new grads. There are some industries that are locked out, hospitality, travel, that's not where you're going to go right now. But you will go to work. What it comes back to is developing your network, and everyone at BU should be part of your network. You have to build that up. People that you've been sitting in class with, build that up. Faculty members that you've had throughout your time here, build it up. Colleagues from all of your past jobs, whether you were a lifeguard or a grocery bagger or a paper boy or girl, it doesn't matter. All of those people are people who know you, who would be happy to help you in any way they can. So that's one. The other is people often need direction on how to help you. And so you need to be able to say to them, I'd love to meet someone who works in this kind of technology, whatever that might be, or in biotechnology or in healthcare. You need to be as direct as possible because they will try to help you. So continue to recognize that your outreach will pay off. It's always going to be longer than you anticipate, but you will end up with work. You're at a great university, developing some great skills, and you're very marketable. This is not here forever, and I know it will be slow, and I know it's tiresome, but keep pushing ahead, and you will find a job.
Great. Thank you, Elaine. As always, I mean, you're fantastic. Your advice is always so warranted, so needed. And once again, you're such a great friend of Questrom, but you're also an alum of Boston University. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to our students. And let me know through email if there are topics you'd like us to cover in the future, or any advice that we can take from you to make some of these webinars more helpful. So thank you. And thank you, Matthew, for coordinating this.
Thanks all. Bye.
Okay.